My name is Clara, and I never imagined the people sitting across from me at a family dinner would be the very ones plotting against me. The table sparkled with candles, laughter filled the air, but beneath it all, I felt a chill I couldn't explain. They say family is the safest place you can be. But what if the people you love most are the ones setting the trap? Before I take you deeper into my story, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, tap that like button, and subscribe if you want more powerful stories about family betrayal and survival. The dinner had all the markings of a celebration. Crystal glasses caught the glow of the chandelier. Silverware gleamed like it had been polished just for the occasion. My parents loved perfection, and tonight they had achieved it. On the surface, it was just another Hayes family dinner. To everyone else, it might have looked like harmony. To me, it was a performance, a stage where each of us played our parts. I smiled when my father, Thomas, raised his glass to toast my latest promotion. "To Clara," he said with the kind of pride that carried more weight in public than in private. The star of this family, our steady hand. The table erupted in applause. My mother, Evelyn, dabbed the corner of her eye with a napkin, but I knew better than to believe her tears. I nodded politely, keeping my voice soft. "Thank you, Dad. I'm just doing my best." What I didn't say was how many nights I had worked until dawn, or how often I'd put my own life aside to make sure this family had a roof over its head. None of that mattered in this room. It was all about appearances. Across the table, Isabel leaned back in her chair, a faint smirk playing at her lips. My younger sister had always known how to look sweet when others were watching, only to turn sharp when no one else could hear. She reached for my hand and squeezed it. "We're so proud of you, sis," she whispered. Her nails dug just a little too hard into my skin, as though reminding me who really pulled the strings. I laughed lightly, though my stomach twisted. I was supposed to feel safe here, surrounded by my own blood. Yet all I could feel was distance, like I was on the outside of a glass wall, watching a family that looked familiar but wasn't mine anymore. Dinner carried on with stories of business ventures, neighborhood gossip, and Isabel's latest romance. She told it well, her eyes sparkling when she spoke of Julian, her on-again, off-again boyfriend. My parents leaned in, hanging on every word, their attention locked on her. They were captivated, and she thrived in it. I stirred my drink slowly, catching my reflection in the glass. My smile was still in place, but my eyes betrayed me. I had spent years being the dependable one, the one who kept accounts balanced, who showed up when bills were due, who made sure problems were solved before anyone else noticed. They loved the results but not the person behind them. That's the part they never talk about, the hours alone, the silent sacrifices, the weight of carrying a family on shoulders that no one ever asked about. They called me the strong one, but strength has a price, and mine was loneliness. "Clara," my mother said suddenly, snapping me out of my thoughts. "You must be exhausted, working the way you do. Don't you ever think about settling down?" Her tone was sweet, but there was judgment buried underneath. She didn't mean rest. She meant marriage. She meant giving up the career I had fought so hard for and molding myself into the picture of what she believed a daughter should be. I placed my fork down carefully. "I think about it," I said, my voice even. "But I like the life I've built. I'm happy with where I am." The silence that followed was sharp. My father cleared his throat and changed the subject. Isabel giggled and began talking about her weekend getaway, pulling the spotlight back where she wanted it. My mother's smile returned, but it didn't reach her eyes. As laughter bubbled up again, I leaned back in my chair, letting the sounds wash over me. From the outside, it was perfect. A happy family, gathered together, sharing food and stories. But underneath the candlelight and the carefully prepared meal, something darker was moving. It's strange, isn't it? You can sit at the same table you've known all your life, look into the same faces that raised you, and still feel like you're dining with strangers. That night, I didn't yet know the full extent of their betrayal, but I could feel it, like a storm pressing against the windows, waiting to break. And when it did, it would shatter everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and what it meant to be part of this family. The first time my phone buzzed, I almost ignored it. Family dinners had an unspoken rule: no distractions, no excuses. My father hated when I glanced at my phone, so I slid it under the edge of the table, but the screen lit up again, and this time, curiosity got the better of me. One line of text stared back at me. Leave now. Don't let them see. She can put you under. I froze. My fork clattered against my plate, loud enough that Isabel shot me a look. You okay, sis? She asked sweetly, though her eyes held something sharper. I forced a smile. Just tired. Long day at work. But my hands trembled as I locked the screen. The words burned into me. Who would send something like that? Who was she? I excused myself to the restroom, my heart hammering. Behind the locked door, I opened the message again, reading it 3 times, hoping it would make sense. It didn't. A second later, my phone buzzed again. This time, a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then pressed answer. A man's voice filled my ear, urgent and low. Clara, listen to me carefully. Don't drink anything. Don't eat anything you haven't served yourself. Who is this? I demanded, my voice trembling. It's Julian. The name hit me like a slap. Julian, Isabel's ex-boyfriend. We hadn't spoken in years. What are you talking about? You're in danger, he said flatly. Your sister and your parents. They're planning to drug you tonight. Once you're out, they'll take your fingerprints, access your accounts, drain everything. I pressed my back to the cool tile wall, the room spinning. That's insane. Why would they? Because they're desperate. Julian cut me off. The house is mortgaged to the ceiling. Your dad's investments collapsed, Isabel. She's drowning in debt. They think you're the lifeline. They're going to use you, Clara, and they don't care what it costs you. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. You expect me to believe my own family would? I wouldn't call you if it wasn't true, he said, his voice breaking. I was with Isabel long enough to know how far she'll go. I saw the way your parents backed her up. They're not the people you think they are anymore. I sank onto the closed lid of the toilet, gripping the phone with both hands. His words carved into me, each one sharper than the last. Images flashed in my mind, my father's proud toast, my mother's gentle smile, Isabel's nails digging into my hand. Had that all been a mask? Why are you helping me? I whispered. There was silence on the line for a moment. Then Julian said softly, because you don't deserve this, and because I couldn't stay quiet and watch them destroy you. My chest tightened. I wanted to deny it, to call him paranoid, bitter, wrong. But deep down, something in me cracked open. I had felt the distance growing for years, the way their affection was always conditional, tied to what I could provide. Maybe I had just been too afraid to face the truth. A knock on the bathroom door made me jump. Isabel's voice floated through, syrupy sweet. Everything okay in there, Clara? You've been gone a while. I stared at my reflection in the mirror above the sink. My face was pale, my eyes wide with fear. For the first time in my life, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. I have to go, I whispered into the phone. Be careful, Julian said quickly. Don't let them know you suspect anything. Play along. That's the only way you'll get out of there safely. The call ended, but his warning lingered in my ears. My pulse pounded so loudly it drowned out everything else. I splashed water on my face, forcing a steady breath. When I opened the door, Isabel was standing right there, smiling too brightly. You look pale, she said. Come back to the table. We saved you some juice. Her hand brushed my arm, lingering a second too long. My stomach twisted. I smiled faintly, hiding the storm inside me. Of course, wouldn't want to miss a thing. As I walked back toward the glowing table, laughter rising to meet me, one thought kept repeating in my mind. If this is true, then tonight isn't a dinner. It's an ambush. When I slipped back into my chair, the laughter seemed louder than before, almost forced. Isabel passed me the breadbasket, her eyes studying me too carefully. My parents carried on as if nothing were wrong, but my pulse was racing so hard I could barely swallow. I kept my smile fixed, nodding at the right moments, while my mind drifted somewhere else entirely. Because what Julian had said lit up memories I had tucked away, things I never thought I'd need. Years earlier, I'd learned the hard way that, in the world of finance, you couldn't afford blind trust. A former colleague once siphoned money out of a joint project, nearly costing me everything. That was the year I built my defenses. I bought a phone with recording features hidden in plain sight. I created layers of security around my accounts. Not just passwords, but voice and fingerprint recognition, double encryption, secret alerts. It wasn't paranoia. It was survival in a business that could turn on you overnight. And now, sitting at my own family's table, Those same precautions rose in my mind like a shield I hadn't known I'd need. I could hear Julian's voice replaying. "They're going to drug you. They'll use you." My throat tightened. The glass of orange juice in front of me glistened under the chandelier's glow. My mother's hand had been the one to set it down. I pressed my palms against my lap, reminding myself to breathe. If he was right, then I couldn't let them know I knew. Panic would be fatal. Performance was the only way through. I glanced at my purse resting on the side chair. Inside, my phone was already recording. A small red light blinked silently, unseen by anyone but me. The truth would be captured, one way or another. "Clara?" my father asked, his voice cutting through my thoughts. "You look distracted." I forced a gentle laugh. "Just work. Always more numbers than time." He nodded, satisfied, and turned back to Isabel, who had launched into another story about an investor she'd met at a gallery. She spoke with such ease, weaving her words like silk, but all I could hear was Julian's warning beneath it. I thought back to late nights in my apartment, double-checking my systems, recording conversations just in case. At the time, I told myself it was for business. I never imagined it would be for this, for the people who raised me, who shared my blood. The realization was a blade twisting in my chest. It would have been easier if the threat had come from strangers. But this was betrayal dressed in familiar faces. I reached for my napkin, dabbing my lips, pretending composure. Inside, my heart begged me to get up, to run. But I stayed because now I needed proof. I needed to know just how far they would go. Isabel caught my eye across the table, tilting her head slightly as if she could sense my unease. Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was a smile I'd seen before, when we were children and she'd stolen something from me, daring me to take it back. That night, though, the stakes were so much higher. As the conversation flowed on, I leaned back in my chair, letting the rhythm of their voices cover my silence. I thought of the security codes, the recordings, the careful steps I'd built into my life. For years I believed they were for boardrooms and backstabbing colleagues. Now I knew the truth. My own family had become the enemy, and the only way I would survive was to play along, record everything, and wait for the moment their masks would finally slip. The orange juice sat in front of me, glowing in the soft light. Innocent to anyone else, but to me it looked like poison dressed up in crystal. My mother's hand had placed it there just minutes ago. She was laughing now, leaning toward my father, her bracelets clinking against the table. To anyone watching, she was the picture of warmth. But all I could hear was Julian's voice warning me not to drink. I wrapped my fingers around the glass, lifting it slowly, just enough to play the part. Isabel's eyes flicked to me instantly, sharp, watchful. "You should try it," she said sweetly. "Fresh squeezed, just for you." Her tone was light, but her stare told another story. She was waiting, testing. I raised the glass to my lips, forcing my hand not to shake. The smell of citrus filled my nose. I tilted it, letting the rim brush against my mouth, but never letting the liquid touch my tongue. Then, casually, I set it back down. "Delicious," I lied, offering a small smile. Isabel's gaze lingered a moment longer before she turned away, satisfied. My pulse hammered in my ears. That was close, too close. I reached for my plate instead, cutting into the roast chicken. Every move had to look natural. Every smile had to appear genuine. If they sensed even a hint of suspicion, I'd be finished. My father cleared his throat, launching into a story about his younger days, how he had built his career from nothing. I nodded in all the right places, though my mind was miles away. My phone was still recording inside my purse, every sound, every word, proof if I could make it through the night. Isabel reached for her wine glass, swirling it lazily. "Clara, you always work so hard," she said, her voice dripping with sweetness. "Don't you ever wonder what it would be like to just let go? To stop controlling everything?" Her words landed heavy. I smiled thinly. "Maybe someday. For now, I like having my feet on the ground." She smirked as though my answer amused her. My mother chuckled softly. "You worry too much, Clara. Tonight is about relaxing, enjoying family. Don't be so guarded." Guarded. The irony of it nearly made me laugh. If only they knew how guarded I truly was at that moment. Every nerve on edge, every thought a calculation. I shifted in my seat, brushing my hand casually against my purse, reassuring myself the recorder was still running. My father droned on, Isabel chimed in. My mother laughed on cue. It was all a performance, layers upon layers. And I was playing my role too, the dutiful daughter, calm, trusting, oblivious. The weight of the deception pressed against my chest. I thought of all the years I had believed in this family, sacrificed for them, carried them. And now, here I was, smiling across the table at people who wanted to strip me down to nothing. I caught my reflection in the silver serving spoon beside my plate. My smile looked perfect, but my eyes told the truth. Fear, resolve, heartbreak. I placed my fork down, folded my hands in my lap, and leaned back slightly. If they wanted a performance, I would give them one. If they were waiting for me to fall, I would decide how and when. As Isabel laughed at something my father said, her hand brushed the stem of my glass, inching it closer to me. I felt the shift in the air, the silent pressure. So I picked it up again, nodding with false cheer. And this time, as I tilted it toward my lips, I let a single drop touch my tongue, just enough to taste the bitterness, just enough to know. Then I set it down, steady as stone, and smiled wider than ever. Inside, though, I was screaming, because in that moment, I knew Julian had been telling the truth. The bitterness of that single drop lingered on my tongue, sharper than it should have been. It wasn't the sweetness of oranges. It was chemical, acrid, wrong. My stomach clenched, though I hadn't swallowed. A chill spread through me, not from the drink, but from the knowledge that Julian had been right all along. My fingers tightened around the glass. I had a choice now. I could confront them, slam the glass down, accuse them, demand answers. But one look across the table at Isabel's narrowed eyes, my father's steady gaze, my mother's calm smile. I knew if I did, they would deny everything. I'd be the hysterical one, the ungrateful daughter. No one outside these walls would ever believe me, so instead, I made my decision. I shifted slightly, letting my elbow bump the stem of the glass. It tipped with perfect timing, spilling orange liquid across the tablecloth. The juice splashed against my plate, dripping onto the floor. "Oh," I gasped, pushing my chair back. My hand went to my forehead. I don't feel so well." Isabel was on her feet instantly, her smile too wide. "Clara, sit down. It's fine. Don't worry about the mess." My vision blurred, but only because I forced it to. I let my head loll slightly, blinking slow, uneven. My mother's chair scraped back, her voice calm but clipped. "Richard, help her. She's going to faint." Perfect. Exactly what they wanted. I let my body go slack, collapsing into my father's arms with just enough weight to convince them. My eyes fluttered closed, but my ears stayed sharp, my mind awake. The world went dark, but their voices painted the truth clearer than any daylight. "Is she out?" Isabel's voice, tense, eager. "Not fully," my father muttered, shifting my arm. "But she will be. Look at her. Hurry before she comes to." My mother's tone was colder than I'd ever heard it. "Get her hand. We need the fingerprints." My heart thundered in my chest, but I kept still, limbs heavy, breaths shallow. Isabel's fingers gripped mine, pressing them against something smooth. My phone. I recognized the shape even through the haze I pretended to be in. She was trying to unlock it to breach the layers I'd built. "It's not working," Isabel hissed. "She must have extra security." "Try again," my father snapped. "We can't lose this chance." My mother's voice cracked then, desperate. "We need this, Richard. The house, the debts. This is the only way." And in that instant, something inside me broke clean through. Any illusion of love, of loyalty was gone. They weren't saving the family. They were sacrificing me for it. I kept my face slack, my breath slow, but my mind was searing every word into memory. My phone, still recording from my purse, would hold it all. Their greed, their betrayal, their willingness to use me like a key to open their cage. Finally, my father's voice, harsh and low. "Enough, we'll try again later, she's too alert. Help me move her to the couch." Hands lifted me, carried me across the room. I let my head rest against my father's shoulder, the scent of his cologne filling my nose. Once, that smell had meant safety. Tonight, it was poison. They set me down gently, arranging me as though I were fragile glass. Isabel brushed hair from my face, her touch tender, but her words were not. She always thought she was smarter than us. Let's see how smart she feels now. I wanted to open my eyes, to scream, to fight, but I stayed still, the perfect victim, because now I had what I needed. Proof. Their words, their actions, evidence strong enough to shatter their perfect mask. And as I lay there, feigning unconsciousness, one thought burned brighter than all the rest. They thought they were in control, but the truth was, I had just turned their game into mine. The couch was soft beneath me, but every muscle in my body was rigid with control. I kept my breathing shallow, slow, steady, the rhythm of someone slipping into unconsciousness. My eyelids stayed heavy, but my ears caught everything, and what I heard tore through me like glass. "She's tougher than I thought," Isabel muttered, her voice close, almost over me. "She should have gone down by now." "She will," my father replied firmly. His hands were never far from command, whether in business or here in this twisted plot. "Just give it time. Once she's out, we'll finish it." There was the clink of a glass being set down, the rustle of fabric as my mother moved closer. Her tone was low, urgent, stripped of the sweetness she always wrapped herself in. "We can't afford mistakes. The bank keeps calling, the mortgage is hanging by a thread. If we don't get access to her accounts tonight, we lose everything." My chest ached, not from fear, but from the sharp betrayal laced in her words. My own mother. The woman who once rocked me to sleep, who bandaged scraped knees, who whispered that family would always protect me, now treating me like a vault to be cracked open. Isabel's laugh was soft, bitter. "Honestly, I don't know why she gets to have it all anyway. The job, the money, the recognition. She thinks she's so perfect." "She's not perfect," my father cut in, his voice sharp. "She's useful. That's all that matters now." Useful. The word stung more than any insult could. I wasn't a daughter, a sister, a part of this family. I was a tool, a solution, a means to an end. For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Then my mother spoke again, her voice trembling, but not with remorse, with desperation. "We raised her. We sacrificed for her. Isn't it only right she gives back when we need her most?" My father's reply was cold as stone. "This isn't about fairness, Evelyn. It's survival." I wanted to scream, to sit up and demand how survival had turned into betrayal, how love had curdled into this. But I stayed still, listening, etching every word into my memory. Isabel's fingers brushed mine again, pressing them clumsily against my phone. She hissed in frustration. "It's not unlocking. She must have changed the settings." "Keep trying," my father ordered. "We need those accounts. We need her prints, her passcodes, whatever it takes." The weight of their words pressed on me harder than their hands ever could. In that moment, I understood something I'd never allowed myself to face. They didn't love me, not the way I had loved them, not unconditionally. Their affection had always come at a cost, and tonight, they had shown me the final price. From the outside, our family had looked polished, enviable, even admirable. But here, in the quiet shadows of our living room, the truth stood naked. Greed had eaten away at the roots. Desperation had poisoned the soil, and loyalty, whatever was left of it, had been traded for survival. I lay there, motionless, fighting the storm inside me. My heart wasn't breaking. No, it was hardening, cooling into something I could use, because if they saw me as nothing more than a resource, then I had nothing left to lose. At last, my father sighed in frustration. "Enough for now. Let her sleep. We'll try again later." Their footsteps retreated, soft, against the rug. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the faint ticking of the grandfather clock. And in that silence, my resolve crystallized. I would not be their victim. I would not be their sacrifice. They thought they had stripped me down to nothing, but what they had really done was set me free. Because now I knew the truth. And with the truth, I could fight back. When I finally stirred, I did it slowly, like someone climbing out of a heavy dream. My eyelids fluttered, my breath uneven, my body slack. I let out a faint groan as if I was still fighting the pull of unconsciousness. "Clara?" My mother's voice was immediate, soft but calculated. She was close, maybe sitting at the edge of the couch. "You fainted. You gave us quite a scare." A scare. The words nearly made me laugh. If only she knew how much I had heard. But I forced my lips into a weak smile, blinking as though confused. I don't know what happened. Maybe I worked too much this week." My father knelt beside me, placing a steadying hand on my arm. "You should be careful," he said with a sigh that almost sounded genuine. "Stress can be dangerous." Dangerous. He had no idea how much weight that word carried now. I sat up slowly, swaying just enough to keep the act believable. My head dropped forward, my hands pressing against my knees. "I think I should go home," I murmured. "I just need to rest." For a moment, silence hung in the room. Then Isabel chimed in, her tone wrapped in false concern. "Don't be silly, Clara. Stay. We'll take care of you." I looked at her through lowered lashes, noting the sharpness hiding in her eyes. She didn't want me to leave. Not yet. Not until they got what they came for. But I had already made my decision. "I'll be fine," I said, my voice trembling just enough to sell the illusion. "I just need some sleep. I'll call you tomorrow." My mother touched my hand, squeezing gently. To anyone else it might have looked tender. To me it felt like a chain tightening. "At least let us drive you," she urged. I shook my head quickly. "No, really, I'd rather walk. Fresh air will help." Their faces shifted, too quickly, too controlled. I saw it then, clear as crystal. Disappointment. Not worry. Not love. Disappointment. Because their plan had slipped just out of reach. My father rose, helping me to my feet. His grip was firm, guiding me toward the door. I let myself lean on him slightly, my body still heavy, as though I hadn't quite recovered. Inside, though, every nerve was alive with fire. At the doorway, I turned back. My gaze swept over all of them, my mother with her mask of worry, my father with his rigid calm, Isabel with her too sweet smile, and I knew this was the last time I would see them like this. "Thank you for dinner," I whispered, forcing my lips into another fragile smile. "I'll see you soon." But inside, my voice was saying something else entirely. This was goodbye. The air outside hit me like a baptism, cool, sharp, clean. I inhaled deeply, as though it were the first real breath I had taken in years. Behind me, the house glowed warmly, a beacon of false security. To the neighbors, it was a picture of family bliss. To me, it was a prison I had just walked out of. And as I stepped into the night, unsteady but free, I made a promise to myself. I would not come back. Not as their daughter, not as their sister, not as their salvation. That part of me was gone, left behind on that couch where they thought I was powerless. What they didn't know was that I was already stronger than they could ever imagine. And now, for the first time, I was ready to fight. At the doorway, I hesitated just long enough for them to believe I was still vulnerable. My hand rested on the knob, but I turned back, forcing a weak smile. "Thank you again," I said softly, my voice carrying the cracks of exhaustion. Isabel stepped forward before anyone else could. "At least let me give you a hug," she insisted, her arms already opening wide. Her perfume hit me before her touch did, sickly sweet, familiar, almost suffocating. I let her wrap herself around me, her cheek pressed to mine. To anyone else it would have looked like sisterly affection, but I felt her breath hot against my ear when she whispered, "Get some rest, Clara. Tomorrow will be easier. For all of us." A shiver ran down my spine, but I held still, giving her a pat on the back as though nothing were wrong. "Good night, Isabel," I murmured. My voice was even, steady, betraying nothing. Then my mother came, her arms delicate but her grip firm, like a woman who didn't want to let go of her prize. She kissed my cheek, her lips cold. "You know we only want what's best for you," she said. Her words, so carefully chosen, echoed like a warning. Best for me. If only she knew I'd finally stopped believing her version of best. My father was last. He rarely hugged me, but tonight he did, pulling me close in a way that would have warmed me once upon a time. His voice was low, steady in my ear. "Don't overthink everything, Clara. You'll see in time, we're right." I pulled back slowly, my eyes meeting his. For a brief moment, the mask slipped, and I caught the flicker of something raw, fear maybe, or greed. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced with his usual stern calm. I forced another smile, nodding. "Good night, Dad." There it was, the last act of the evening, a perfect show for the neighbors who might have been watching from across the street. A family saying goodnight, hugging at the door, sending their eldest daughter home after a long day. But underneath the embrace, every touch carried betrayal. Every word was a blade wrapped in silk. As I stepped off the porch, I could still feel the ghost of their hands clinging to me. Isabel's nails digging just a little too deep, my mother's lips leaving a chill instead of warmth. My father's arms heavy, not protective, but possessive. And yet, as painful as those goodbyes were, I knew something with absolute certainty. They would be the last. Because what none of them realized was that this farewell wasn't temporary. This wasn't the kind of goodnight that promises tomorrow. It was the kind of goodbye that closes a chapter forever. I walked down the driveway slowly, deliberately, my body still feigning weakness, but inside I was stronger than I had ever been. Behind me I heard the door close, their voices muffled by the walls. I didn't look back. The night air wrapped around me, cool and clean, carrying away the stench of betrayal that clung to that house. Each step I took felt heavier with grief, but lighter with freedom. This is it, I whispered to myself. The last embrace, the last lie, the last time I let them touch me like they still owned me. And though my heart ached, though tears threatened at the corners of my eyes, I kept walking, because from this moment forward, every step was mine. The next morning the sun rose like nothing had happened. The light poured through my apartment windows, warm and golden, but I couldn't feel its comfort. My body was still heavy with the memory of last night, their voices, their touches, their betrayal. On the table sat my purse, the one I had guarded so carefully through that dinner. My phone rested inside, still recording until I had shut it off hours later. My hand hovered over it, hesitant, trembling. One swipe of my thumb, and there it was. Hours of audio. Their words, their plan, their confession. Proof. For a long moment I just sat there staring at the screen. A part of me wanted to delete it, pretend it had never happened. Pretend that my family hadn't just tried to drug me and rob me blind. Pretend that I still belonged to them. But the truth burned too deeply now to ignore. By noon I was sitting in the waiting area of the local police station. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. People came and went, some with anger etched into their faces, others with despair. And there I was, somewhere in between. When the officer finally called my name, I followed him into a small room with beige walls and a metal table. My palms were damp, my throat dry, but my voice held steady as I introduced myself. "I need to report a crime," I said, "and the people responsible are my family." The words tasted like ash. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to keep going. I placed my phone on the table, sliding it toward him. "It's all there," I whispered. "Their voices, their plan, everything." The officer pressed play, and within seconds the room filled with the sounds of last night. My sister's bitterness, my father's commands, my mother's desperation. Their words, so sharp in the moment, sounded even colder played back through the tiny speaker. I sat there listening, each sentence like a knife reopening the wound. My own family, stripped of every illusion, their love reduced to transactions, their loyalty to survival. The officer's eyes flicked up to mine, steady and serious. "This is strong evidence," he said. "We'll move forward with this." I nodded, but my body felt numb. Strong evidence, moving forward, words that belonged to courtrooms and case files, words that meant my parents and sister would face consequences. But they were also words that meant I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Walking out of that station, I felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter because I had spoken the truth. Heavier because of what it cost me. I paused on the sidewalk, the afternoon sun glaring in my eyes. Strangers bustled past, carrying bags of groceries, walking dogs, living lives untouched by betrayal. For them, family might still mean love, safety, belonging. For me, it now meant evidence bags and case numbers. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I choose the truth," I whispered, "no matter how much it hurts." And with that, I turned and walked forward, leaving the police station and the last fragile thread of my family behind me. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of interviews and paperwork. Every time the phone rang with the detective's number, my stomach dropped. I would sit in that same beige-walled room answering question after question, dates, times, details. How long had the debts been building? Had I noticed anything suspicious before? Did I have proof that it wasn't just paranoia? Proof. That was the word that kept me steady. My phone carried their voices, every poisonous word captured. Still, each time I pressed play, my heart cracked open again. To hear my father commanding, my mother justifying, my sister mocking, it was like reliving the betrayal in slow motion. One evening, the lead detective leaned across the table, his expression calm but firm. "Miss Hayes, once we file these charges, there's no going back. Are you sure you want to proceed? These are your parents, your sister." I stared down at my hands, fingers laced tightly together, knuckles white. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The weight of the question pressed against me like a stone. Was I ready to destroy the only family I'd ever known? But then I remembered the sound of Isabel's voice sneering, "She thinks she's so perfect." I remembered my father calling me useful, my mother claiming it was only right that I give them everything I had. And in that memory, I found my answer. I lifted my eyes, steady and clear. "Yes," I said. My voice didn't shake. "I'd rather live alone with the truth than chained to a lie. If I let this go, they'll never stop. They'll find another way. And I refuse to be their victim again." The detective studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, we'll move forward." Walking out of the station that night, I felt the ache settle deep in my bones. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't relief. It was something heavier, the grief of burying people who were still alive. I passed a family on the sidewalk. A father holding his daughter's hand, a mother laughing as she carried groceries. Their simple closeness cut deeper than any knife. I realized then that the ache inside me wasn't just about what my family had done. It was about what I would never have again. The illusion of belonging, the comfort of believing someone had my back simply because we shared blood. But illusions don't keep you safe. The truth does. At home, I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker. I thought about the night at the dinner table, the glow of the chandelier, the way I'd smiled through my fear. They had taught me one final lesson, that family isn't defined by blood, but by choice. And I was choosing differently now. I was choosing survival. I was choosing myself. The road ahead would be painful. Trials, hearings, judgments, my parents' names and Isabel's plastered in court documents. But I knew deep down that the hardest part was already behind me. I had chosen the truth. And even though it hurt, even though it left me hollow, it was the only path forward. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living for their approval. I wasn't living to protect their image. I was living for me. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, but in atmosphere. A space stripped of sentiment where only facts mattered. I sat quietly in the back, hands folded in my lap, trying to keep my breathing steady. The judge's voice carried through the room, calm and decisive, cutting through every memory I had of laughter around that dinner table. "Thomas Hayes, Evelyn Hayes, Isabel Hayes, you have each been found guilty of attempted fraud and conspiracy." The words landed like thunder, though the room stayed silent. I glanced at my parents across the aisle. My father's jaw was tight, eyes fixed on the bench. My mother's hands shook as she twisted a tissue, her face pale. Isabel, in her designer blazer, kept her chin high, but the flush creeping up her neck betrayed her. The judge continued. "Given the evidence and your lack of prior convictions, this court sentences you to probation, financial penalties, and community service." It wasn't prison, but it was enough. Enough to ruin the facade they had worked so hard to maintain. Enough to make sure the neighbors whispered. Enough to ensure the Hayes name would never carry the same weight again. As the gavel came down, Isabel shot me a look that could have cut glass. Her lips parted as if she wanted to spit venom across the room, but she stayed silent. I met her gaze without flinching. For the first time, she couldn't touch me. Outside the courthouse, the air felt heavy with endings. Reporters milled around, their questions sharp, their cameras flashing. My parents walked past them quickly, faces a mask of shame. Isabel followed, sunglasses covering her eyes, but not her rage. In the weeks that followed, the fallout spread like wildfire. The house that had once been the center of our family dinners was sold to cover debts. My parents moved into a smaller place, far from the neighborhood that had once envied them. Isabel lost her job, her reputation too stained by scandal for anyone to take her seriously. Even Julian, the man she once believed she controlled, disappeared from her life for good. And me? I walked away with nothing but my name, and for the first time, that was enough. It wasn't easy. Nights alone in my apartment stretched long and quiet. Sometimes I caught myself reaching for the phone, tempted to hear my mother's voice, my father's laugh, even Isabel's teasing. But then I remembered the couch, the whispers, the way they spoke of me as though I were just a tool to be used. That memory was the anchor that kept me steady. One evening, I stood at my window, watching the city lights flicker against the horizon. For years, I had built my life around being their savior, their solution, the dependable one who carried everything. Now, with them stripped of their illusions and me stripped of my family, I realized something profound. Sometimes justice doesn't look like revenge. Sometimes justice is simply the truth being seen for what it is, and as much as it broke me, I knew I had chosen right. Because freedom, even when it comes with loneliness, is worth more than love that was never real. The first morning in my new apartment felt strangely quiet. No ticking of the grandfather clock, no sound of footsteps moving across polished wood floors, no voices drifting from the kitchen. Just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and the faint buzz of the city outside my window. I stood barefoot on the hardwood floor, staring at boxes stacked against the wall. Some still sealed, some half opened, each one a reminder that I was building something from scratch, a life without them. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The light slipped through the blinds, spilling across the room and touching everything it found. My couch, my books, the small dining table I'd bought secondhand. There was nothing grand here, nothing showy, but it was mine. Every piece had been chosen by me, for me. I carried a cup of coffee to the window and sat on the sill, pulling my knees up under my chin. The steam rose in the cool morning air, warming my face. For the first time in weeks, my heartbeat wasn't racing, my breath wasn't shallow. It struck me then how simple peace really looked. No applause, no toasts, no staged dinners under glittering chandeliers, just sunlight, coffee, and quiet. But peace came with its shadows too. My mind still replayed their voices, the venom hidden beneath their smiles. I could still feel Isabel's nails in my hand, my father's arms lifting me, my mother's kiss on my cheek. Every detail haunted me. And yet, sitting there in the silence, I realized those ghosts no longer had power. They were echoes, not chains. I took a slow sip of coffee and let the warmth settle in my chest. A thought surfaced, gentle but steady. Maybe this was what freedom tasted like. Not sweet, not bitter, just real. I had always believed family was everything. That belief had been carved into me since childhood, repeated in every holiday card, every sermon, every family photograph where we all stood shoulder to shoulder, smiling for the camera. But the truth was different. Family can also be the ones who break you, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. The neighbors downstairs were already awake. I could hear the muffled sound of a radio playing an old love song. Someone laughed in the street below. Life was moving forward, indifferent to my losses, and maybe that was the lesson. The world doesn't stop when your heart breaks. It simply offers you the chance to start again. I glanced at the boxes by the wall. Inside were things I wasn't sure I wanted to keep. Photographs, gifts, keepsakes tied to memories that now felt poisoned. I would sort through them eventually, decide what deserved to stay and what needed to go. For now, it was enough to leave them untouched. Outside, the sky shifted brighter, gold overtaking the gray. The city stirred awake, but my little corner of it remained still. I whispered to myself, as if testing the sound of it on my lips. This is mine now. My space. My life. It wasn't triumph I felt. Not yet. It was something quieter, more fragile. But it was enough. Enough to keep me sitting there, watching the day begin, believing that maybe tomorrow could be brighter than yesterday. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't dread what was coming. I welcomed it. The second night in my apartment was harder than the first. Daylight had kept me busy, unpacking boxes, hanging a few pictures, scrubbing down the kitchen counters until they shined. But when the sun dipped and the city lights flickered on outside my window, silence returned like an uninvited guest. I sat at the small dining table with a plate of pasta I barely touched. The hum of the refrigerator filled the space where voices used to be. I could almost imagine my mother fussing about the seasoning, my father telling some long-winded story, Isabel interrupting with her sharp little quips. For a moment I let myself remember it as if it had been real, warmth, laughter, belonging. Then the memory twisted, revealing what lay beneath. The poison in the glass, the whispers over my body. The way they had reduced me to nothing more than a key to their survival. The fork slipped from my hand, clattering against the plate. I pushed the food away, appetite gone. Loneliness pressed in on me, heavy and relentless. It wasn't just the absence of their presence, it was the absence of the idea of them. The family I thought I had, the bond I believed in, was gone, and in its place was this hollow quiet. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. "Is this what freedom feels like?" I whispered. Because freedom wasn't glamorous. It wasn't fireworks or applause. It was empty rooms, long nights, and the slow process of relearning how to breathe without waiting for permission. But then, as the silence settled deeper, something shifted. I realized that the weight pressing on me wasn't theirs anymore. It wasn't my responsibility to carry their debt, their mistakes, their greed. For the first time in my life, the only weight I bore was my own. And that, in its own quiet way, was relief. I stood, walking barefoot across the cool floor, and opened the window. The night air spilled in, crisp and clean. Below, people passed by on the street, their conversations drifting upward in fragments. A couple argued softly about groceries. A man laughed into his phone. Life was messy, imperfect, unfiltered, and it was still moving forward. I thought about how much of my own life had been staged, just like those family dinners. How often I'd swallowed my feelings to keep the peace. How often I'd sacrificed so they could stand taller. I'd worn my strength like armor, never realizing that it was making me a prisoner too. Now, standing by the window, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Space, breathing room. The ability to exist without someone else's demands pulling me in every direction. Loneliness was there, yes. But loneliness wasn't the enemy I thought it was. It was the reminder that I was finally on my own side. I closed my eyes and let the breeze touch my face. One step at a time, I told myself, one day at a time. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. Freedom isn't loud. It isn't always joyful. Sometimes freedom is just a quiet night, an open window, and the realization that you survived. And survival, in its own way, is the purest kind of victory. There's a question I've been turning over in my mind these past few weeks. What does revenge really look like? In the movies, it's dramatic. Someone storms into a room, exposes every secret, and walks away triumphant while their enemies crumble. Part of me wanted that. The fiery confrontation, the moment where I could watch their faces fall as they realized I had beaten them at their own game. But sitting here now, in this quiet apartment with the hum of the city just beyond my window, I realize revenge doesn't always come with fire and spectacle. Sometimes it comes with silence. My family wanted me powerless, dependent, broken. They wanted to use me, hollow me out, turn me into a resource instead of a daughter. If I had let them, they would have won. But the fact that I walked away, that I refused to play the role they wrote for me, that's where the victory lives. The courts gave them fines, probation, community service. On paper, that was justice. But the sweeter justice, the one they never saw coming, was this. I am free. Free from their manipulation. Free from their expectations. Free from the cycle of sacrifice they built and forced me into. I think about Isabel sometimes, about the fury in her eyes when the gavel came down. For her, the punishment wasn't just the sentence, it was watching me walk away untouched, unbroken, still standing. That was the wound she couldn't heal. And my parents? For them, the real consequence isn't community service or financial ruin. It's knowing their perfect family image shattered because of their own choices. They can blame me, but deep down they know the truth. They destroyed themselves. The sweetest part of revenge I've learned isn't watching others fall. It's knowing you no longer care if they rise or not. It's detaching yourself so completely that their chaos no longer reaches you. For years, I thought justice meant retribution, getting back what was taken, balancing the scales. Now I see it differently. Justice is choosing peace when destruction would be easier. Justice is refusing to let bitterness become your only companion. I run my hand across the windowsill, feeling the cool air drift in. The sweetest revenge, I whisper, is freedom. And it is. Because now, when I wake in the morning, I don't check my phone for messages from them. I don't rush into my day to solve problems that aren't mine. I don't live with the weight of someone else's expectations on my shoulders. I live with silence, with choice, with my own breath, steady and unshaken. That is the life they never imagined for me. That is the life they can't touch. And as painful as the journey has been, I wouldn't trade it. Because in walking away, I didn't just escape them, I found myself. The morning light came slowly, stretching its way across the floorboards of my apartment. I sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sun climb higher with every passing minute. There was no sound but the ticking of the clock on my wall and the distant rumble of traffic below. No voices, no tension, just stillness. I held a cup of tea in my hands, its warmth seeping into my palms. It struck me how different this morning felt from the dinners I'd once endured. There, the table had been filled with food and laughter, but beneath it all lived manipulation and betrayal. Here there was nothing extravagant, just me, my tea, and the rising sun. And yet, this silence was worth more than all the chandeliers and crystal glasses in the world. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to check my phone, to anticipate someone else's demands. I didn't feel the pressure to perform, to smile on cue, to carry the weight of a family that never truly carried me. I was simply present, existing in a space that belonged only to me. I thought about everything I had lost. The image of family, the illusion of unconditional love, the comfort of belonging, even if it was false. Those things used to define me, to hold me in place. But as I watched the day unfold, I realized something profound. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought mattered to finally find what does. What mattered now wasn't their approval. It wasn't the role I had been forced to play. What mattered was peace. And peace, I was learning, wasn't loud or flashy. It didn't demand attention. It was quiet, steady, and deeply personal. The world outside my window was waking up. Dogs barking, a child's laughter carrying up from the street, the smell of bread baking in the cafe down the block. Life kept moving. It always does. And I had a choice, to live chained to the past or to step forward into something new. I sipped my tea, closed my eyes, and chose. I chose to breathe. I chose to let go. I chose to live. It wasn't easy. Some mornings the ache of what I'd lost still pressed against my chest. Some nights I dreamed of their voices and I woke up with tears on my face. But healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering without being controlled by the memory. I stood and opened the balcony door, letting the fresh morning air wash over me. The sun had risen fully now, casting the city in golden light. It touched everything. The rooftops, the streets, the faces of strangers beginning their day. And it touched me too, warming me from the outside in. I whispered into the morning as if speaking to the girl I used to be, the one who believed family meant safety no matter what. You're free now. You can finally breathe. And in that moment, I knew this was the ending I had needed all along. Not revenge, not reconciliation, but release. Because the sweetest revenge isn't destruction. It's walking away, choosing peace and living a life untouched by those who tried to break you. The sun rose higher, the day fully begun. I stepped back inside, closed the door gently, and smiled to myself. For the first time in years, I felt truly alive. Healing doesn't arrive with a sudden burst of light. It comes slowly, quietly, in ways you hardly notice until one day you realize you're no longer carrying the same weight. In the weeks after the trial, I felt like I was walking through fog. Some mornings, I would wake with a lump in my throat, the echoes of their voices still clinging to me. I would make coffee, stare out the window, and wonder if freedom was supposed to feel this empty. People think escape means joy, but the truth is more complicated. Escape is the removal of a cage, yes, but what you're left with is silence, and silence forces you to face yourself. I knew I couldn't keep living in that fog, so I started small. Each day I made a ritual of letting go. Some nights I lit a candle and sat with my journal, writing down every memory that hurt, every word they had thrown at me, every betrayal I had overheard while pretending to be unconscious. Then, I would close the notebook and say out loud, "This doesn't own me anymore." It felt awkward at first, almost childish, but over time, the act of speaking those words became powerful. It was as if I was telling my heart over and over that I deserved peace. One afternoon, I opened a box I had been avoiding, the one filled with old family photographs, smiling faces, vacations, birthdays. My graduation, where my father's arm rested proudly around my shoulders, Isabel's sweet smile when she was 10, my mother in her Sunday dress, her hand brushing hair from my face. For a moment, I felt the ache of longing, the wish that those snapshots could still be real. Then I reminded myself, photographs capture moments, not truths. Those smiles were real, yes, but they were only one side of the story. The other side was the silence that came after, the expectations, the hidden claws. I didn't burn the pictures, I didn't tear them up. Instead, I placed them back in the box and slid it under my bed. Maybe someday I'll be able to look at them without bitterness. For now, it's enough to put them away, out of sight, out of reach. Another step in healing came when I started walking. Every evening, I put on my sneakers and walked through the city, block after block. The rhythm of my steps, the sound of strangers' conversations drifting past, the simple reminder that life goes on, it all stitched me back together in quiet ways. I passed bookstores, flower shops, kids riding bikes, and I thought, this is what living looks like. Uncomplicated, ordinary. And ordinary, I realized, is a gift. Of course, not every day was progress. Some nights, loneliness felt unbearable. I would curl up on my couch, tears slipping down my face, whispering to myself that I had done the right thing. And deep down, even through the pain, I knew it was true. Choosing truth over illusion is always the harder road, but it's the only one that leads somewhere real. One evening, as the sun set behind the skyline, I caught my reflection in the glass of my window. For the first time in months, I didn't see fear in my eyes. I didn't see betrayal or shame. I saw someone scarred, yes, but still standing. Someone who had walked through fire and was still here, still breathing. I pressed my palm against the glass, whispering softly, "You made it. You're free." And in that moment, I felt the fog begin to lift. Healing wasn't a destination, it was a choice I would make again and again, to release what was behind me, to honor what I had survived, to believe that peace wasn't just possible but deserved. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in years. It took me a long time to realize that the kind of love I had been searching for wasn't going to come from my family. For years, I had bent myself into shapes I thought would make me worthy, working late, paying bills, holding everything together, always being the one they could lean on. I thought if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, eventually they would see me, truly see me. But they never did. And when I finally walked away, I felt stripped bare. Without their expectations weighing on me, I didn't know who I was. I had built my identity around being useful, dependable, the daughter who carried the weight. Without that role, I felt empty. It was during one of my evening walks that something shifted. I had wandered into a park just as the sun was setting, the air turning cool. Children were still running through the grass, their laughter ringing out, while parents watched from benches. I sat on a swing, the chains creaking softly as I moved. For a moment I closed my eyes and imagined what it would feel like to be that carefree again. No responsibilities, no masks. Just the simple joy of existing. And then it hit me. The love I had been chasing wasn't out there, waiting for someone else to give it to me. It was something I had to build inside myself. Unconditional love, the kind I longed for, had to start with me. That night, I stood in front of the mirror in my bathroom. At first, all I saw were the shadows of exhaustion. The lines stress had etched into my face, the sadness lingering in my eyes. But I forced myself to look longer, deeper, to look past the pain and see the woman who had survived betrayal, who had chosen truth, who had walked away when staying would have been easier. I touched the glass, my reflection staring back at me. "I love you," I whispered. The words sounded strange, fragile, but I said them again and again, until my chest ached and my throat tightened and tears ran freely down my face. I wasn't saying it to convince myself. I was saying it because it was true, because after everything I had been through, I deserved to hear it. I deserved to believe it. In the days that followed, I made it a practice. Every morning I reminded myself that love didn't have to be earned by sacrifice, that I didn't have to destroy myself to deserve belonging, that the only person whose approval I truly needed was staring back at me in the mirror. Slowly, I began to treat myself differently. I bought fresh flowers for my table, not because anyone was coming to visit, but because I liked the way they brightened the room. I cooked meals that nourished me, not just filled me. I took long baths with music playing softly, letting the water carry away the weight of the day. These weren't grand gestures, they were small, simple acts, but each one was a declaration. I am worth caring for. And with each act, I began to understand something powerful. Love doesn't always arrive from others. Sometimes the truest love is the one you give yourself, the love that says, "I choose you," even when no one else does. That realization didn't erase the pain of what I had lost. It didn't erase the scars, but it gave me a foundation stronger than anything my family had ever offered. It gave me a sense of belonging within myself. One evening, I returned to that same park. The swings were empty now, the air cool and still. I sat again, closing my eyes, and this time I didn't imagine what it would feel like to be carefree. I simply felt it, the breeze on my skin, the rhythm of my breath, the quiet certainty that I was enough. For the first time, I wasn't searching for love outside of myself. I was carrying it with me, and that, I realized, was the most unconditional love of all. It's one thing to walk away from people who hurt you. It's another thing entirely to keep the door closed when they come knocking. About a month after the sentencing, I received the first phone call. My mother's number flashed on the screen, the same digits I had memorized as a child when I needed to call her to pick me up from school. For a moment, I almost answered. Some old reflex inside me still craved her voice, still wanted to believe she could offer comfort. But then I remembered the words I'd overheard that night, the desperation in her tone as she said, "We need this, Richard. The house, the debts. This is the only way." I let the phone ring until it went silent, but she didn't stop. A week later, a letter arrived. Her handwriting was the same looping script she had used on birthday cards and holiday notes, but the words cut differently this time. She wrote about family, about forgiveness, about how mistakes were made but love still remained. She asked me to meet her just once so we could make things right. I sat at my table, the letter trembling in my hands. I thought about all the years I had bent myself to fit their definition of love. I thought about the orange juice glistening in that glass, about Isabel's smirk as she pressed my fingers against my phone, about my father calling me useful. And I realized something. Forgiveness doesn't mean walking back into the fire. Forgiveness can mean wishing them peace from a distance. So I wrote back. My words were careful, but firm. I know what you want, but I cannot give it to you. I have chosen to live free of the lies and expectations that nearly destroyed me. I will not meet, I will not return, I will not allow myself to be part of your world again. My healing depends on distance, my peace depends on boundaries. I hope you find your own peace, but I will not sacrifice mine to create it. When I dropped the letter into the mailbox, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. Grief because I knew truly and finally that I had severed the last thread tying me to them. Relief because I had spoken the words my younger self had never dared to speak. No. After that, the silence grew, the calls stopped, the letters ended, and though a part of me mourned that final disconnect, another part of me began to breathe easier. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing myself for their demands, their criticisms, their subtle manipulations. The boundary I had drawn wasn't just a wall to keep them out. It was a door I had opened for myself. A door to a new life, where I got to decide who entered and who didn't. I started to imagine the kind of relationships I wanted to build, ones rooted in honesty, in mutual respect, in care that didn't come with strings attached. I realized that blood may bind people together, but love is what truly makes a family. And love, the real kind, never asks you to destroy yourself just to prove it exists. One evening, as I walked home from the park, I passed by a family sitting on their porch, laughing together. For the first time, the sight didn't sting. I didn't feel envy. I didn't feel longing. I felt hope. Because I knew now that I could create my own version of that someday, with friends, with chosen family, maybe even with a family of my own. But it would be different this time. It would be healthy. It would be mine. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of lavender from the candle I had left burning earlier. My home was quiet, but it was safe. It was honest, and it was enough. I closed the door behind me, leaning against it for a moment, whispering to myself, this is the life I choose, and I won't go back. That night, for the first time, I didn't dream about them. Life after them didn't come in grand transformations. It came in quiet routines, in the smallest details that no one else would notice. I found myself enjoying mornings again. I'd wake up before the sun rose, brew a pot of coffee, and sit by the window watching the sky shift from gray to gold. There was no rush to check messages, no pressure to be the family's savior, just me, my mug, and the stillness of a day waiting to begin. I started walking to work instead of driving, letting the rhythm of my steps set the pace for my thoughts. The bakery on the corner always smelled of fresh bread, and sometimes I treated myself to a croissant. Not because I earned it, not because it was a reward for carrying someone else's burden, simply because I wanted to. That freedom felt new, almost revolutionary. Little by little, I rebuilt my world. I filled my apartment with books I had always meant to read, plants that thrived under the sunlight pouring through my windows, and music that made the silence feel alive instead of empty. Each choice was mine alone, and with every decision I made, I felt myself grow stronger. Confidence didn't come overnight. At first, I second-guessed myself constantly, wondering if I was making the right moves. But then I realized the right move wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing for myself, without fear of disappointing anyone else. One evening, I caught my reflection as I passed the hallway mirror. I stopped, looked closer, and almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. There was still pain in her eyes, but there was something else too. Calm, steadiness, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. For the first time, I didn't see a victim. I saw a survivor. The city outside kept moving, the world kept turning, and I was moving with it, not weighed down, not looking back, just living. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift of all. There was a time when I thought strength meant speaking louder, fighting harder, proving myself over and over again. That was the role I played for years, the dependable one, the voice of reason, the shield that absorbed every storm. But after everything collapsed, I learned something I wish I had known sooner. Sometimes the greatest power is silence. Silence isn't weakness. It's not surrender. It's the choice to no longer waste your breath explaining yourself to people who never intended to listen. It's the refusal to argue with lies, to wrestle with manipulation, to carry a weight that was never yours in the first place. When I stopped answering the calls, when I stopped showing up to play the role they wrote for me, I felt something shift inside me. I thought I would feel guilt. Instead, I felt peace. And that peace grew stronger each day I stayed quiet. There's freedom in silence. Freedom to redirect your energy toward things that truly matter. Freedom to choose joy over obligation, truth over illusion, life over survival. I realized my silence wasn't just about shutting them out. It was about opening myself up to new experiences, to healthier relationships, to the possibility of a future that wasn't defined by betrayal. One evening, I wrote a sentence in my journal that became my anchor. I don't need to prove my worth to anyone. Seeing it in ink, permanent and undeniable, was like lifting 1,000 pounds off my chest. I used to believe survival meant fighting tooth and nail. Now I know survival can also mean walking away quietly, closing the door gently and never looking back. And in that quiet, I discovered the kind of strength that doesn't shout, doesn't demand, doesn't need to be seen. The kind of strength that simply exists, steady, unshakable, free. When I look back now, I don't see a story of betrayal. I see a story of survival. I see a woman who walked away from the people she thought would protect her, and in doing so, finally learned to protect herself. The greatest lesson I've taken from all of this is simple. Sometimes love means letting go. Sometimes family isn't the people you're born to, but the people you choose. And sometimes the sweetest revenge is not destroying those who hurt you, but refusing to let them destroy you. If you're watching this and you've carried the weight of toxic relationships, whether with family, friends, or anyone who tried to make you feel small, I want you to know this. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to choose peace over chaos. You are allowed to love yourself enough to say, no more. My story isn't unique. Betrayal wears many faces, but so does healing. And healing always begins with a choice. So here's my message to you. Choose yourself. Choose freedom. Choose the life that allows you to breathe without fear. And if this story spoke to you, if it reminded you of your own strength, share it with someone who might need to hear these words. Leave a comment below about your journey, hit that like button, and subscribe so you don't miss the stories we tell here. Stories about survival, about truth, and about the courage it takes to begin again. Because in the end, that's what this is about. Not revenge, not even justice, but the courage to start over, and the power to finally call that freedom.